On today's episode of On the Workbench, we're going to be featuring a head-to-head showdown between the Milwaukee Inkzall fine point pen and the comparable Sharpie fine point pen. Both of these are commonly, the Sharpie is the traditional, or at least one traditional way of marking materials. That retails for about 97 cents. The new Milwaukee fine point Inkzall marker is designed to be a competitor to the Sharpie and retails for $1.29. Both of these here were bought brand new off the shelf at a big orange box store recently and have never been used, and we're going to put them head to head today and see how they compare. We have a piece of walnut, we have just a standard construction 2x4, we have a piece of red oak, and we have a piece of just regular Schedule 40 PVC pipe that we'll be comparing against. So when we look at the marker here, the Milwaukee Inkzall also is touted as being compatible with a hard hat clip as compared to the Sharpie, which has just a traditional pocket style clip on it here. And so before we actually go head to head here, I got my personal hard hat here, and my personal preference on a hard hat is a broad brimmed hat that looks like this. And let's see if this can actually clip on or not. Using the hard hat clip on the side. So with a little bit of effort, this was able to clip onto the side of the hard hat. Feels actually pretty secure to the point that I can even pull the marker out of the clip there. Obviously just marked on the hard hat here and can be clipped back in place. Just for comparison, if I had the Sharpie, I could also clip this onto the hard hat, or attempt to. As I'm fumbling it with my hands, the Sharpie is much slicker in feel here, and this doesn't really clip as well as the Milwaukee does. So we'll go ahead and give Milwaukee credit for their claim of that you can actually attach it to your hard hat, but probably with the caveat of you might want to do it ahead of time, and it's not the easiest. Maybe this would work better with a different hard hat than the broad-brimmed one that I wear when I have to wear a hard hat. But we'll go ahead and give Milwaukee credit for their claim. That can be substantiated. It's also just a nice, much more tactile in the hands, as opposed to Sharpie, which has a very slick, smooth finish. As you saw me just dropping the Sharpie there, that's perhaps another point for the Milwaukee, has been easier to grip and less likely to fall out of my hands. But now when it comes to marking, so I also happen to have a piece of just 80 grit sandpaper here off my random orbit sander, and we'll also be able to test to see how easy it is for these marks to be able to be sanded off. I also have, just for reference, just a regular old number 2 pencil that's sharpened. And so I'm going to start here on the construction 2x4. This is just a small cutoff of a 2x4. I make the pencil mark there. Now I'm going to use the Milwaukee Inkzall. This is the first time this Inkzall has ever been used. And put the mark there. And now we'll go for the Sharpie. Again, this is now the first time the Sharpie's been used. And we'll draw the line there. So as we look at the 3 lines that we made, the first one was the pencil. That's a very got clearly defined edges. The second one was the Milwaukee Inkzall marker, which clearly had a tendency to bleed compared to the Sharpie, which maintained a nice clean consistency throughout for the most part and did not spread nearly as bad as the Milwaukee Inkzall. We take our piece of 80 grit sandpaper and we lightly sand over it. And about the same amount of effort it takes to hide the pencil line. You can see what's left. The Milwaukee Inkzall is still visible. The Sharpie is just about gone, and that's also indication you tell just of how well it bled. So now let's change surfaces and look at the Schedule 40 PVC pipe. We'll start off with the pencil. You can see there's a faint pencil line there that got drawn. Let's go with the Milwaukee Inkzall. Looking like that. And the fine point Sharpie. Looking like that. And after looking at this, it appears like the Inkzall again still bleeds just a little more than the fine point Sharpie. Because this is a smooth surface, let's go ahead and give this a nice finger test and see if this will smear. This has been on there for a few seconds now. Chance to dry. Obviously the pencil mark Finger comes up clean. And if I rub either of them with my hand, both of these have dried very nicely onto the pipe with no problem and are clear there, but we can still see how the Sharpie comes up with less bleeding than what the Milwaukee Inkzall did. Okay, so now let's look at some hardwood samples. Here's the walnut, so we've got a darker wood here. Let's put the pencil mark on the walnut there. This is just a piece of scrap. Let's put on the Inkzall. That. It's got some clear consistent edges, and now let's take the fine point Sharpie and go. In this case here on the walnut, it looks like there wasn't much more bleeding on the Inkzall compared to the Sharpie. However, the fine point Inkzall is still much wider than the fine point Sharpie. Let's go back to our sandpaper test and let's give this a quick sanding. After a quick sanding, the pencil line is gone and the Sharpie line is almost gone, but there's still remnants that are visible of the Sharpie. And now on to our final test. We've got this piece of red oak. I've got a few pencil marks on here already to begin with here. There's a pencil line. You can tell. We'll go ahead and put let's be consistent, put the Inkzall line next. The Inkzall line is there, and now the Sharpie line. And we can see again the Inkzall line bleeds just a little more, it's a little wider than what the Sharpie is. So now if we go side by side here, let's see if we can pull these markers out, just to be able to compare the fineness of their tips. The Milwaukee is a longer and skinnier marking point here at the end. The Sharpie is shorter, wider, and just by the naked eye, it'd be difficult to tell them apart. And my instinct would tell me that the Milwaukee one would actually produce a cleaner mark, but based on our testing today, that's not actually been the case. I think it depends on your application, whether this is better or worse or indifferent. The difference in cost between the two when purchased at the store today was 32 cents, where the Milwaukee was 32 cents more than the Sharpie. Sharpie was 97 cents and the Milwaukee was $1.29. That difference could really add up if you're buying these in bulk for a big construction project. Or there's always the good old-fashioned pencil, which works just as well in many cases. Obviously, you got to keep the pencil sharp and have a knife to do that, or a little sharpener that works. That's probably my honest preference compared to actually paying for a marker that may go dry and the like. And so, based on these tests today, it's hard for me to recommend the Milwaukee over the Sharpie or the Sharpie over the Milwaukee. If anything, I prefer the Sharpie over the Milwaukee because it seems to bleed less and sands out quicker. But perhaps your mileage may vary, or you find the feature of the hard hat clip. Now let's try a little cap exchange. Now I've got the Milwaukee cap and I've got the Sharpie, and I'm trying to mate these together, but unfortunately it's not able to click. It seems like the tapering here on the barrel end of the Sharpie is just a little different enough that it won't clip into place into the Milwaukee lid. If I take the Milwaukee Inkzall and place it into the Sharpie lid, it'll clip, but it won't actually hold. It seems to fall out. The Milwaukee is just a little narrower. So the Milwaukee we can snap back together and mate it back with its actual cap, and the Sharpie back with its actual cap, so we can't really switch those back and forth. If you're having trouble with the slickness of the Sharpie falling out, you could always just wrap a piece of duct tape around it, or other tape to give you just a little grip that you might want to hold on to it. And so with that, that's a quick look at the Sharpie versus the Milwaukee marking instruments. Thanks, and have a great day.